Good morning, everybody. There's four of us here today. Yay!
Yay!
Yay. Good
We
morning.
like the looks of this frame so much that we decided to just go live with it instead of bringing in Jenny and Seth. So, hi everybody, welcome to Thursday Live. It is that time again, and it's this is a week, a special week. What's the name of this week? I forget.
Well, in the
Oh,
Christian tradition, we call it Holy Week.
And we're going to be talking about Holy Week today, right?
We are
Because
indeed. I have lots of questions to ask Jenny and Seth and make them explain things.
yeah, and because yeah, um, they're not bald white men.
This is very true.
They have
Very,
more
yeah,
very.
more to
not far
say.
off.
Yeah,
Yes,
don't
one of
even.
us may be heading in that direction, but I can say that would not be me.
Very good, very good. We're going to once again start off by talking about hair. What is going on today at the in the life of First United Methodist Church in Oak Ridge, Tennessee? Anything
There has been
fun?
a great deal of activity at the church, that's for sure. Mostly involved getting ready for tonight, our worship service that begins at 7 p.m. in the sanctuary, or as Seth likes to refer to it, the nave. That'll be our Maundy Thursday service. Then tomorrow night, getting ready for our, would you call it, Seth? This is something new. Instead of doing a tenebrae service where we gently lower the lights, the candles, as we read the crucifixion story, this is going to be an adoration of the cross. Would that be the appropriate term?
Absolutely, that would be exactly what this is. Kind of our time to, Good Friday is our remembrance of the crucifixion. So an adoration of the cross service. While it sounds like we're adoring the cross, what we're doing is just recognizing the fullness of what's in front of us, the goodness of Good Friday, along with the terribleness of Good Friday, and kind of wrestling with. Uh, all of the emotional roller coaster that we go on through the week. So I'm excited about it, though. Yeah, it is different.
Very different for us, and very positive. And then also getting sunrise service put together. That would be 7 a.m. and we're gathering in the Memorial Garden. This will be a little bit different, our sunrise service this year, 7 a.m. And we'll do part of it outside and then enter and have part of it inside in the nave. And that way we get some guitar music and that sense of being outside in the garden, as on that first Easter morning. And then we also get the joy of communion shared in that setting, the beautiful setting that we're surrounded by the beauty of our sanctuary, and we get the organ to be able to play and lead us as well. We get kind of the best of both worlds.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I wanted to talk this morning and about different parts of Holy Week. But Steve, anything else we need to cover? You want to tell
Well,
people what we're doing?
there's the usual stuff, such as welcome. I'm Reverend Stephen D. Martin. I am the communications person for the church, and that's why I'm here. Otherwise, I just kind of get out of the way and operate the tech and listen to these people do their thing. And then, of course, if you're a repeat viewer of this broadcast, you'll know that at some point Mark will run out of questions. His imagination will leave him, and he has to call out some phrase, usually a movie or something, a movie title, and work it into to what he's saying, and then I actually have to pick up on it and jump back in, and that's a little behind the scenes thing. So what's the safe word today, Mark? What do you think?
I I think we will have our special guest choose that safe word for us. Jenny or Seth, what's your favorite movie?
Somewhere
Oh,
in
good.
Time, James Seymour and Christopher Reeves, 1980.
I love that movie. Okay, Jenny, what's yours?
Oh,
Oh, I have not. You know, I'm not a movie person. You didn't warn
Oh,
me about this one. No.
well,
Um,
this is all
Blindside.
Blind Side. That's tough to work in. Okay, uh,
Wait, what
but
was
that
Seth's?
somewhere in time. Say something for those who don't know this wonderful, cheesy, sentimental movie, Seth, that I adore. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh gosh, somewhere in time, 1980. Like I said, Christopher Reeves, Superman, and Jane Seymour, the actress, not the famed Queen.
I did actually run into Jane Seymour in Lenox Mall in Atlanta many years ago. So no
I would
selfie,
just
no
die.
selfie, but
I would just die.
I did sit. It was actually Wendell Werner and I sat at a table in the food court next to Jane Seymour. So anyway, move along,
So I
folks.
have 1 degree of separation from her. Excellent. Love to see it. No, it's a movie about sort of whimsical romantic time travel, and his character, Christopher Reeve's character, is staying at a hotel in Michigan and comes across a painting of a lovely woman, which entrances him, and he works to go back in time to be with her. And I'll leave it there so I don't spoil the ending.
Yes, love that. For those who haven't seen it, it's your introduction to Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini.
Which was in my
That
wedding because I love the movie so much.
Rachmaninoff piece that you will identify with immediately, and it will pull you closer into classical music. It's great. Yeah, I know. It's so
Okay,
special.
so that's the
Holy
safe
Week.
word. I really do hope I can remember all that because I think we've got a variable thing. It could be one or the other, right?
That's right.
It
That's right.
could,
You
so
may
this is
actually have to
getting
pay
really
attention.
complicated. Yeah, and just again, I have to remind everybody this is a live video. This is a live conversation. This is a great way for you to jump into the chat. Put your comments in the chat. We'll see if we'll pop them up on the screen, things like that. It'll be fun. And this is a great way for you to ask questions that have been puzzling you about Holy Week. And I'm just going to start off with the first question, Mark, if that's okay. Okay? Because I think that sometimes we in this little circle can just get into doing shop talk and we can forget that that maybe there's I'm going to say not just maybe, there are a lot of people out there that don't know what we're talking about when we say Holy Week. So what is Holy Week and what makes it holy? What gives it that special extra name?
Wonderful. And we'll let our non-balding white male person answer this one. Jenny, why don't you take this one? What gives Holy Week that name?
Well, it's Holy Week because this is really the epitome of our faith. That this is what it's really all about. When people think of Christianity, they think of Christmas first. And Christmas is wonderful. That is when God came into this world, and it's all about incarnation. But the message of Holy Week, and this is obviously my take on it, of course. But this is when we remember Jesus's last week and what happened during that week and the incredible gifts that he gave to us. So first in Maundy Thursday is when we celebrate the Last Supper, which of course everybody knows about because of the great artwork that has been done with that. But that is when Jesus ate with his disciples and where he gave us communion, where he shared a meal with his closest friends, and where he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And then he did the same thing with the cup, and so gave us that sacrament, one of our 2 sacraments, and just how meaningful and important that is, because in communion we try to take the essence of Christ into ourselves so that we can become more Christ-like. And then also on Maundy Thursday, we have from the Gospel of John, where Jesus washed his disciples' feet. He got down on his hands and his knees, and he was a servant, which reminds us, which came a little bit in Mark's devotion this week, about power. What does power look like? And for God and for Jesus, it comes in service. So we remember that on Maundy Thursday. And then Friday, we go through Good Friday, which is not an easy time. It's incredibly painful. But again, Jesus was willing to walk that path. And then so we go through that, and then we get to celebrate the joy that comes from Easter. So it is by walking that path and remembering those incredibly important moments that we get to experience the fullness of Easter and the celebration. Jesus was human and his body was killed, but that is not the end of the story. And that is the importance, of the resurrection, that what God can do and take that, and then what God can turn it into. So that's my
Very well
synopsis.
done. Very well done. And I'll go ahead and what I'd already told. The only thing I told Seth and Jenny about today was that I was going to ask them what was their personal favorite experience during the Holy Week experience. But I'll limit it, even saying Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, sunrise service. You can add Holy Saturday if you want to, and then Easter morning when we're gathered together. What's your favorite moment of all those experiences that happen, or all the stories that happen in those experiences? And since Jenny, you are going ahead and telling us what you thought, well, ask Seth, what of those experiences, what stands out to you as the moment during these last few days of Holy Week that you go, oh, that's really special to me? Seth, what do you think of?
Well, let me do that two parts. First is, first, my favorite is Holy Saturday, which Methodists don't typically do a lot on. So let me pause that for a moment. In our what we typically do, Good Friday is always probably the most meaningful service to me, which is one of the reasons why I jumped on it this year to kind of spearhead, if you will. That we live in a world that loves positivity, and there's nothing wrong with positivity. We look for hope in lots of places, which is great. But in that, we sort of have a non-confrontational edge where we don't like to deal with the negative emotions communally, right? We understand depression and anxiety. We understand dealing with our own negative emotions, but we don't like to get together as a group and just sit in uncomfortableness. And I think Good Friday is, for me, it's that time when we can communally share together in that full range of emotion, the depth of pain, hurt, guilt, suffering. But then also all of that's held up and undergirded by the hope that we have. We know the ending. What's the phrase that people like? It's Friday, but Sunday's coming, right? We know what's coming, but as a whole group, we lament and we grieve together, which we typically don't do outside of like funeral services. That's basically our only communal grieving. Now, my favorite though is Holy Saturday, and that idea of Easter Vigil. Remember, liturgically, or our predecessors in the Jewish faith, the day didn't begin at sunrise, it started at sundown. So traditionally, when the sun goes down on Holy Saturday, we can liturgically say it's Easter Day. So a lot of times, many church groups throughout history, and some Methodists still do, celebrate a long service on Saturday night called the Great Vigil of Easter. It's a communion service, it's got baptisms and confirmations, but the first part is kind of a lessons and carols, sort of, that plays through God's salvation history. So not necessarily Jesus dying per se, it's mentioned, of course, but the readings track God's salvation and covenant with humanity from the very beginning of creation all the way through, which to me is a theologically incredible way to set up Easter, which we say is almost one step before the fulfillment of that salvation, right? Jesus' coming and living and dying and resurrecting is sort of the proof of the pudding of God's covenant and love for us. So I love tracking that salvation history, and then the joy of Easter is always great. But so I'd say Friday here, Saturday, most other places.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Very, very much. Well said. Jenny, what's of all those from Maundy Thursday to Easter afternoon, what's your favorite part of that experience?
So again, the two sides. As far as the message of it, I mean, I so fully agree with Seth, and I think we can't emphasize this enough that, people in general, and especially I think Americans and especially Christians, we like to be happy. And some people seem to think that if they have a strong enough faith, they will just sail through life and there won't be any real deep challenges. They won't have any doubts or anything like that. And that just reminds us that simply, I mean, as Christians, if anyone, we should know that isn't true. That isn't true. And so the importance of, one of my mantras in life is everyone and everything is a package deal. And this sort of reminds us, no matter how much we love God and God loves us, that is not going to protect us from suffering. And so often we can get into the idea that, truly this is a day the Lord hath made when it's a beautiful sunny day. we forget that if anything, God is more present in our times of suffering than in our times of celebration. And to me, that is the beauty and the
Hmm.
challenge. And I guess for me, the Good Friday moment when we hear Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, in that moment,
Hmm.
even Jesus felt abandoned. And then that just comforts me when I worry that, you know, my faith isn't strong enough. If Jesus at times felt that way, that makes it okay that I sometimes feel that way as well.
Hmm.
So I guess that is, yeah, and I hadn't really thought, I was going to talk about communion, and just how important and meaningful that is. But I guess it really is that moment, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because it's so easy to feel that way when God has never forsaken any of us and will never
Yeah.
forsake any of us.
Yeah. I love
Mhm.
you two so much because that's a perfect example of the exchanges that we have. I'd like you to name one thing, and Seth says, "Well, I'm going to name two," and Jenny says, "Oh, well, I was going to say this, but now I'm saying this." It's in the moment, caught up. I love that about you. That's perfect. Well, I want to focus for just a little while on Maundy Thursday, um, and I want to start by asking. I'll let Seth take this question. I actually had Wesley, my grandson, going to school this morning. I said something like, "It's Maundy Thursday," and he's like, "What's that? What's Maundy?" Seth, why do we call this Thursday instead of Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday?
Yeah. Well, Holy Thursday is, of course, an acceptable
Hmm.
term to use. It is part of the Holy Week framework. But we specifically call Thursday Maundy Thursday based on the theme of the day, which, like Jenny said, is our sort of ritual and sacramental remembrance of the Last Supper. And
Hmm.
in the dialogue that Jesus taught the disciples there at the Last Supper, one part of that is when Jesus gives us a new commandment. We get that new commandment to love God and love one another as ourselves. And commandment has a Latin root, as most things do in church, of mandatum, which is the noun for a commandment or a mandate, which is where we get our English word mandate, mandatum. So Old English, I think 1,000 years ago, took that mandatum Latin word and sort of anglicized it to be Maundy. And so we use the term Maundy Thursday because this Thursday and this service reminds us of the new commandment that we get, that Jesus brought us a different way of looking at faith and religion for the time and place where he was. And that new commandment is what's motivating and driving us. And so we recreate that in our service on Maundy Thursday, remembering
Hmm.
Jesus' new commandment for us.
Right.
To love
We
one another
love,
as I have loved you. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
even harder than love one another. Good Lord, as
Yeah.
I've loved you, and then you watch what Jesus goes through on this week. So, well,
right.
here's what I want to do is of all the events, if you think about biblically, all the events of Maundy Thursday, you have the preparation for the Passover, where Jesus says, "Go and prepare the spot." You have the actual experience of sharing the Passover, Jesus and the disciples. Uh, in Luke, according to Luke, that's when they also have the "Who's the greatest among us?" The disciples
Yeah.
bicker over that, which is that not classic timing? In the midst of that, between the Last Supper and foot washing, let's argue over who's the greatest. Um, then you have John talks about the foot washing, Jesus washing their feet. Peter's response, "No, you're not going to wash my feet," which is again so pride filled. You have the Judas experience of Jesus sending Judas out. They sing a hymn. I think it's in. I can't remember which one. Luke. They sing a hymn together, which I love. I love that fact that Jesus and the disciples sing. That's something we just don't mention. They sing a hymn together, and then they go to the Garden of Gethsemane. You have that entire Garden of Gethsemane experience. Judas coming in, betraying with a kiss. Peter drawing the sword. Ear gets cut off. Jesus heals. He is arrested. I know you. We have not. For those of you who are watching, we have not talked about this. I'm curious. Just hearing me list that grouping of events. Is there one event in there that you think people might, I mean, they've probably heard of it, but it'd be really helpful for them to focus in on that it might expand their spirituality a little bit more? And what would that be? Jenny, I'll let you go
Well,
first.
and
Which of
I would
those?
add one that you left out in the
Oh,
Garden of Gethsemane.
That was going to be mine.
When Jesus goes and prays, there are two really important for me, two very important parts in
yes.
that. One, first of all, he's incredibly honest, and he's saying to
Mm-hmm.
God, "I don't want to go through this. This is not my idea of, please take this cup from me. you
Yeah.
know." But after having asked that and expressing that, he follows it up with, "But thy will be done. I will
Mm-hmm.
be obedient. I will do whatever needs to be done, even
Right.
when this is so not what I want." And that to me, there are times in our faith journeys when we are called to do things that we so do not want to do. Um, and yet that sometimes is our path. The other part of that Gethsemane experience, which I don't know why, but really speaks to me, and maybe it's because it just beautifully shows Jesus's humanity. He
Mm-hmm.
asks, I mean, who's there with him? Peter and
James
John
and
and
John.
James and John. And,
Mm-hmm.
y'all, I'm going through a hard time. Can you just stay awake and pray for me? Oh, I mean, how often does Jesus ask things of people? Not very often. And they fall asleep.
And
And
now
they,
we know why.
yeah, but it's just so classic of, yeah, oh, we're the great. They were probably the ones that were engaged in, that I'm the best. And,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus asks this one thing of them, and they just can't do it. So it's the twofold of, I see Jesus's humanity, where he's wanting comfort, he's wanting help and support
Mm-hmm.
from those that are closest to him, and have attested their deep love, and they just can't do it.
And isn't that's so human to say? Because right before that, they say, "We'll die for you. We'll
Right.
fight and we'll die. We'll do all the big visionary. Ooh, throw my body into it. Can you stay awake?" No, sorry, that's just beyond me. I just can't do that part. The dying we're all about, but the staying awake, oh Lord, help me. All right, Seth, what do you think of when you think about the Maundy Thursday set of events? What's something people should focus a little bit more on than they do?
Well, I hate to repeat, but mine was Gethsemane because it's one of the three. It's one of the three times in Jesus's life, in my opinion, that we see true humanity. That we see not the facade, but the wall of divinity come down. Miracles, great. 5,000 loaves and fishes, great. All of those things show God's power, of course, yes. But the garden, weeping over Lazarus, and then death, those are three very human things. And for me, walking through this week, I mean, we're 2,000 some years out from it, so it's not exactly personally relatable. I mean, none of us have, I hope, watched a crucifixion, right? But so that part's hard for us to sort of really conceptualize. Honestly, it is. In a privileged place like we
Mm-hmm.
are, that kind of suffering isn't a thing for most of us. However, we can experience humanity through this week. We can see Jesus, that little human side come out and say, "God, just take this cup. I can't do it." And then, no, I'm called for this. This is what I'm here for. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I love about Maundy Thursday, is seeing that Jesus is a normal human who eats with his friends, who shares his feelings with his friends. While he sees what's going down the path for him, he wrestles with it. He doesn't just go. It's not, okay, well, I'm going to rise again on the third day, no problem. It's no, I'm going to have to go through this first. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that humanity, and it makes Jesus more tangibly relatable that way for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say for me, the passage in Maundy Thursday that means the most is the foot washing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a calling in our culture to assume that the more important you are, the more people serve you. And that
Mm-hmm.
radical, and I do mean radical in a very thoughtful way, reversal of, but if you follow me, you're not going to be like that. You're not going to be like those that lord power over other people. You are going to serve. And even the disciples are like, wait, whoa, we don't want you doing this. That calling to service that I see, frankly, among I love you two because you actually work and you serve and you're willing to work hard. I see so many pastors that just don't. They love that elevated role of being looked up to by people, and it's amazing how often in so many churches I'll do something like pick up trash. We have our front lawn, if you don't know, is like the perfect receptacle for wind blown trash, and so when I walk in, I pick up trash. I cannot tell you how many people have said, "Oh, you shouldn't be picking up trash," and it's like, what is your image of what it means to be a Christian? Oh, we
Yeah.
pay people to do that. That just drives me crazy. So I love the foot washing image. I think that we ought to reflect a little bit more on that.
Yeah, we had a great conversation in the adult confirmation class that we just finished up last Tuesday. We talked about a couple different things, but one of the things we looked at Tuesday, liturgical theologian going here, were vestments, what we wear while we serve at the table. And I showed them the stole that's beautifully ornate and decorative and golded and gilded, and the chasuble that's long and flowy and extravagant. And they said, it looks a lot like royal vestments, right? That's why you wear them, because you're dressing up for Jesus. And I said, no, actually, it's quite the opposite. Those things we wear are derivative of service. I mean, stoles are things people wipe their hands on. A chasuble was to keep your cloak from getting dirty while you worked. So that's really what it comes down to. And it comes out of that foot washing, is that Jesus said, look, this is who I am, but I'm going to wash your feet in service to you. That's what I'm called to be as a servant.
Right.
And so I love that you went that way, because Maundy Thursday for clergy is a nice reminder. You're not a king. You're not a queen. You're a servant. And I love that reminder every year.
And shout out to Pope Francis that he actually did the foot washing with real people, not just, he does it with real people. Past popes have chosen, special cardinals to get to be in the part of the foot washing and all this. Yuck. Thank God for Pope Francis that he actually gets it. Jenny, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, so the Last Supper and Maundy Thursday, that's Jesus's last full day alive. When you think about the question of, how would you spend your last day on earth? What would you do? And what did he do? I mean, yes, he celebrated the Passover and dinner with his friends, but what did he choose to do? He chose to wash their feet. So how important is that message? Yeah.
Well, very well said. Okay, I want to switch us now to Good Friday. And this was another question from my grandson. Why do they call it Good Friday if we talk about his death? So Seth told us about Maundy Thursday. Jenny, why don't you take? Why is Good Friday also called Black Friday? Why do we call it good?
Well, he didn't prepare me for this one. I'm just saying.
I didn't prepare any of these. I love that.
And it is a good question. And to me, it's because it epitomizes and just illustrates just how far Jesus was willing to go. He says, no greater love has a person than to lay down his life for a friend. And not only did he lay down his life, the other piece and this is perhaps a little bit too autobiographical. What astounds me is, he gets betrayed by those closest to him when he's in, talking to Pilate. Everybody runs because they don't, and Peter denies him the 3 times before the cock crows. And Jesus just looks at him with sorrow, because it would have been an opportunity for Peter to stand by him. And out of fear, he doesn't do that. But what always strikes me is that Jesus doesn't look at him with anger or reproach, which is what I would have done. I would have been ticked. After all I've done for you, and you couldn't just do one thing for me. But that's not Jesus. So he doesn't respond with anger. And to me, that's his divinity over his humanness. But in Good Friday, I mean, it is so blatantly honest about our worst qualities. I mean, Peter did love, all of the disciples did love Jesus. But in that moment, their fear and their self-preservation got the best of them. And what Good Friday and Jesus's sacrifice is showing us is what really matters. and it is not preserving our physical life. You know, all of us are going to physically die, but it is our love. And it is our love, yes, for each other, but that love comes from and is grounded in our love of God. You know, that's why in the Great Commandment we love God first, and then we love our neighbors as ourselves. And so, and again, I went to a Quaker seminary, so I don't even know if they do a Good Friday service. So I can't tell you the theological, but to me, it's Good Friday because it was the fulfillment of Jesus's life here and his message. And he was willing to do it even though he didn't want to. And he was able to sacrifice. And ultimately, yeah, his trust and love of God won over. And that is a good and a beautiful thing. And that is what we need to all strive for, knowing that we will never fully get there in this life, but we continue to strive for that.
Very good. Thank you. So Good Friday, it's good because it does reflect God's love, Jesus' love for us. So now think about all the events, and I just jotted down some of the events, and I want to ask you the very same question. Which event during the Good Friday biblical account would you say would be very positive for people to reflect a little bit more on? You have Jesus before the high priest. You have Peter's denial that Jenny touched on, Jesus before the Sanhedrin, and then Pilate and Herod, that whole going between authorities where Jesus looks like he's the only one that's calm. Everybody else is worried about and has anxiety about who's going to have power over them. Pilate trying to release him, and the whole Barabbas thing, and Pilate washing his hands, right? Then you have the crucifixion sequence proper, the mocking, crown of thorns. Thrown in there is Judas' suicide and the weeping of the women, where Jesus says, "Oh, don't weep for me." The crucifixion itself, casting lots, the sign above the cross, the thieves on either side, where Jesus commends Mary, his mother, to John, the death itself with darkness and the tearing of the veil, and then the centurion's pronouncement, surely this man was the Son of God. That's in the Mark version, I think. Then you actually have Joseph Arimathea coming and taking down the body for burial, wrapping it in the linen cloth. Which, I mean, there's a lot there. Let's face it, the three of us could talk for days on those topics. But is there any one thing that stands out to you? You think, ooh, that would be a good one for people to focus a little bit more attention on? Seth?
Yes. So I'll say that where I'm going with this, it comes from the way I was raised in religion, sort of in sometimes a traumatic way, dealt too much on the actual act of dying. So I move away from the actual, the thorn, crown, the spear, all of that, just because that was a little on the traumatic side as growing up. So I don't tend to focus on that as much. But one thing I think that we do need to name out loud and hold in our thoughts as we go through Holy Week is that the moment behind that is crucify him. The crowd yelling, crucify him.
Mm-hmm.
I know it has been a long tradition of Christianity to really let our anti-Semitic selves show during Holy Week. And the Jews killed Jesus. The Jews killed Jesus. And that crucify him moment points us to the fact that the crowd yelled, crucified him. I'm sure the crowd was mostly Jewish, but they weren't all Jewish. Right. It has nothing to do with the Jewish faith. It has to do with ourselves. And crucify him, which tomorrow night we'll say as a whole congregation, reminds us that, yes, we're in the past. This is a historical event of the past, but the way that we wrestle with sin and the way that we wrestle with temptation and hurt makes us complicit in the sacrifice, the crucifixion, the murder, however you want to phrase it, of Jesus throughout time. And I don't say that with guilt laden. It's not like we're terrible things because we're part of this, but it's for us to understand that this wasn't an event that happened 2,000 years ago. We're done. That we continue to replay the suffering that Jesus felt in times of war, in times of hatred, in divisive politics. All of these ways that we live our lives are incredibly relevant to that moment. We're in the crowd yelling, "Crucify him," when we belittle our neighbor. We're yelling, "Crucify him," when we don't offer charity to someone in need. And Good Friday for me reminds me that while Seth wasn't standing in the crowd, I yelled, "Crucify him." And there are times throughout the week I yell, "Crucify him." And so that's an important connection piece for me, to know
Yeah.
that we're complicit in the pain of the world.
Can I just
Yeah.
throw in something there?
Sure.
Our tendency, yes, to blame the Jews or to blame whoever, is we don't want to own up to what you just said. We don't want to think, oh, well, I wouldn't have done that. And to me, that's a lot of the point is, if Peter did this, yeah, we probably would too.
Probably
And
would
it
have,
goes
right?
back to our need for, the confession. If you and I say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. And
Yeah.
and yet that is our tendency. Is it's painful to recognize our sinfulness and our fear, and the times when our fear and our self-centeredness drives us. But it is only in doing that we can invite God in to help and heal us. So thank you. That's a really important moment.
Yeah. I remember Stanley Hauerwas at Duke once said, a lot of us have this moment of awakening when we realize, oh, if I had been back in that crowd, I would have been shouting, "Crucify him," too. And that's a terrible moment of, oh my gosh, I am so self-centered. I would have so fallen into the culture. He said, what really hurts is the recognition that we would still yell it.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we would still yell it. And it was like, oh, I don't even want to think about that. That's so painfully true.
Well, not that we would, but that we are. We're not
We
saying
are, exactly.
crucify, but it's in other ways, when we do not advocate for the person who is being
I was going to
attacked,
say,
belittled.
welcome to the Matthew 25. As you do it unto the least of these, you are doing it to me. It's the whole point of that Matthew 25 parable.
Right.
So, Jenny, was there another part of that Good Friday experience you want to pull out and say that's something we could focus on?
And I was listening as you were talking, and I was sort of surprised. What spoke to me the most then was the centurion. Surely this was the Son of God. And it's like, it makes me wonder, what makes us aware of God's presence in our lives? What is either the wake up call, when what needs to happen, or what does happen, and are we ready to hear it? I just spent some beautiful time with a family this week who had lost their mother. And they were just telling me at the graveside service, and I wasn't able to be there, just this moment when, they were a little bit removed. They're looking down at the hill, and it was just as beautiful. The Bradford pear trees were just in bloom. The breeze was soft. It was just sort of caressing. And it was this beautiful, God-filled, grace-filled moment for them. And it was just so moving to see how much it meant to this family. And what struck me was, even though they were in deep grief at that time, this was the graveside, they were saying goodbye to this beloved person, there was room for them to recognize God's presence. And, and we wonder, how often do we not see that? And what was it, that led the centurion of all people, and it's the centurion who is recognizing that. It wasn't, one of Jesus's disciples, followers.
It wasn't the religious folk.
No, it was the ones, what did people get stuck with? They got stuck with not recognizing that Jesus was Messiah, because he was supposed to be destroying the centurions, the military presence. And yet it was one of these military presence people who recognized the significance of the moment and named it. Mm-hmm.
Very well said. I have to admit, for me, it's always the thief on the cross. That I think that is just such a huge theological statement, because when we as the church get so caught up in what do you have to believe, and this is, I don't even agree with the way of asking this question. What do I have to believe to die and go to heaven? And we get caught up in beliefs. What belief do I have? Well, think about the thief that says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That's another example of the person the unlikely person who sees Jesus being crucified and how he's dealing with that moment and says, I don't know what you have, but I want it. I want in. Well, that's enough. But then Jesus turning and saying, today you'll be with me in paradise. What did this person not know? He didn't know about Jesus being resurrected. He didn't know that Jesus was Son of God, Son of Man incarnation. He didn't know part of the Trinity. All this stuff that we give so much importance to, and they are important.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't know any of that. It is purely his heart reaching out in that moment, and Jesus says, you get it. I think that's something we need to explore a lot more in this.
Well, and he was repentant. He was repentant, unlike the other, because the other one was doing the power, that you again talked about in your midweek devotion.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it, save us, save yourself. What's all this? And the other guy recognized, no, that's not what it's about.
Right.
I've jumped on the screen early,
and
you knew
you have.
There's a reason for it. I want to hop up a question that Luann Christie is joining our conversation by way of the Oak Ridge Toastmasters moniker on the screen. I'm going to put this question up because I think this is something I really need to interject in the midst of this conversation. She says, only last Sunday I realized the disciples carried swords. Have you ever seen drawings of them wearing swords? First of all, let's just throw that out. And let's talk about swords for a minute in this context. Any response?
Yeah. If you were following someone you believed that was going to overthrow a government, wouldn't you carry a sword or a gun or something? I mean, they all had I think Holy Week, another element is our re-examination of expectations. I think Holy Week is the moment where those disciples realized, oh gosh, we are the army. Oh gosh, we're not overthrowing Rome. What is happening? And I think that's part of the cognitive dissonance they struggled with all through Holy Week, or all through that Passion experience, is because they weren't even having to face oh gosh, our leader is getting thrown in jail and crucified, but our leader isn't fulfilling our expectations. And so I've been personally wrestling with that over the last little bit. And through this season of Lent, but definitely in Holy Week, is altered expectations, what we expect the world to look like because Jesus is in charge, and what does that really mean for us? So that's my little chuck in there.
Well, and the other piece of it is, how safe was Jesus? So how safe was it to be with him? And did they need those for self-protection as well, perhaps?
My understanding is that those swords are referencing a pretty typical short sword that people carried around just for protection all the time. This wasn't a unique thing that the disciples had that, but people carried around just for protection in that area in that season. And yes, there are quite a few paintings where it shows disciples carrying swords, especially in that Garden of Gethsemane passage.
But I wonder if it would in other places, because there it's clearly referenced, but likely they would have had them all the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reason I think this is an important question is not just kind of the obvious, have we ever seen depictions? Because I think there's a lot of conversation throughout the centuries about the role of violence in Christianity. Okay. And there is not a real, there is no consensus around the role and the way that Christians enter into violence, Christians enter into politics. And I think that, there's just a lot of stuff going on in my mind right now. One is that I want to say that, that I think if any of you, or especially any of you out there in TV land, if you haven't been on a Holy Land pilgrimage, if you haven't seen this place, please jump on the next plane to go. Okay. The reason for that is all of these places, um, all of these places have they speak beyond the words on the page. Okay, the people, a lot of the the Palestinians say that uh, they're the living rocks of the area. They are the stories that emerge beyond the scriptures. And I think about my life in Washington D.C. and how it must be for the disciples to walk into Jerusalem and see it all and see the temple and see the big buildings. They say, "Oh, look at these buildings," and Jesus says, "Yeah, well, 3 days they're going to be overthrown. It's all going to come tumbling down." And we all have these kind of reactions when we walk into these big, powerful places, and Jerusalem certainly was that. And that's where I think it really, to me, gives up the real power of place in the narrative, in the importance of understanding the narrative. Now, I want to get to the political side of this. Okay, we've talked a lot about the spiritual side, but and when I mean political, I don't mean voting. I don't mean all that stuff. I'm talking about like Jesus going and they're gathering corn. They're gleaning corn husks or whatever, the barley or whatever in the field, and the Levite or the priest says, "No, no, no, no." The Pharisee says, "No, I can't do that. This is the Sabbath." And Jesus always has an answer to those things. And ultimately, we hear his predictions about his death, and we think, well, this is just some kind of, some kind of prescience that he had. He just, he knew that his purpose was, and we get in a lot of discussions about that. But I would venture to say that he knew it ahead of time because he knows that if you live that way, if you live a life of justice and fairness and goodness to other people, the world will kill you. Do you have any response to that?
That's true. I mean, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, because again, it's similar, I think, to, we don't want to say, we didn't say crucify him. That was somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to think, that goodness is rewarded, but often in this world, that's not true. I mean, goodness and the role of truth, truth, I mean, is very, very important. And yet so often it seems like people will say whatever they need to say in order to get elected, to get power. So just that wrestle that between power and goodness and what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think about Jesus's understanding of justice. Justice isn't the case of like, well, it's fair across the board or it's equal across the board. No. Jesus didn't say everybody's equal. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor, meek," And so that kind of real intentional justice means that we're going to put ourselves in positions to take power or work against power for certain people who have power already. So that's going to put us on the bad list of at least the powerful. And I wonder I'd love to think about how violence plays into that another time.
Yeah, that's a complicated one. Big time. Yeah.
I think the issue, Paul is onto something when he says don't get married. I think he recognizes that most of us who follow Jesus are more than willing to sacrifice ourselves, and we will endure pain. It's when our family members get involved. And that's when violence over the centuries has been approved of by Christians. It's usually because I want to protect something. I want to protect family. I want to protect homeland. I want to protect neighbors and friends. And therefore, surely war's okay. And it's that really harsh call, the realization that to follow Jesus he says, take up your cross and follow. We have not adequately dealt with that. And as a culture, we still set Jesus aside when it's inconvenient, when it comes to sacrificing family and sacrificing our children and our friends. And that's why this conversation about why Holy Week is important really does matter. It's to see Jesus offer that example and say, love each other the way I'm loving you. And then he sacrifices, self-sacrifices, is the radical flip that when you say, I want to talk politics, we all groan because in our mind, we only know the political world of that we see around us, which is take as much power as you can, use it to protect yourself and those you love and your interests. And it's this radical reimagining. No, you use power to serve others. You use power to serve those who are marginalized and poor. And we, as a culture, as a denomination, and the Christian church have not adequately dealt with that.
And when you do that, you're going to get crucified. Woe to you
Right.
who, when others speak good of you and and praise you, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking about in our own denomination right now, the LGBTQ community, who is in a death of 1,000 cuts, getting crucified. And what does the crucifixion story say to that community? How does God's justice in the resurrection speak to the death that people of, when they are just trying to stand up for what is right? What is God's justice? I mean, how does the resurrection speak to that? And then I'm gonna let you guys talk some more. This is the most interesting stuff in the world to me.
I mean, it's much simpler when we have clear-cut rules about this is what, is good, this is what's bad. Sort of what Mark was talking. Do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to make it to heaven. And Jesus kind of challenged all of that and saying, okay, those rules are great, and they're a good foundation. But ultimately, that is not what we should be focusing on. There is a greater good, there is a greater truth that supersedes that. But in order to recognize that greater truth, each one of us has to take responsibility. And we don't like that. I would much rather say, I was just following the rules. But that's the whole thing with the crucified, just going along with the crowd. When as Christians, we are called not to go along with the crowd, but in that moment to speak up and defend the one that needs to be defended, regardless of the price that it will have for us, either physically or in our jobs, in our society. We may lose that respect, and we see that all the time now. When people speak the truth, they are attacked by their cohort because they're not, as Mark was saying, protecting their own. They're trying to speak the truth, and people don't want the truth too often.
Great question here from Laura. What are your thoughts?
Wait.
Oh, wait, sorry.
I want to make sure Seth has a chance to address that.
Okay.
Too.
Well, per your particular question, so for those listeners, there's theologies about everything. And one of the things that we study, and I study as a member of the queer community, is queer theology. And I can tell you probably, this is made up, 8 out of 10 members of the queer community, Good Friday is Matthew Shepard hanging on a fence. And what we see, I mean, it's all over the world, but here in the Southeast, what we see as we go through our daily life, like you said, some of them are micro cuts. Some of them are those boys tying him to that fence and walking away. Some of the things are bigger things, like the dying and the bleeding and the being found. And I think it's different for every queer person, of course, but we have to hold to resurrection, that one day we'll live in a place where that isn't our thought, where we can think about Jesus. We can think about God's love for us instead of saying, that could be me. That could be me at any time. And so I think the queer community has an interesting relationship with Holy Week in that regard, that while there's plenty of other oppressed groups, of course, I'm just speaking to the one I live in, that we deal with those kind of little crucifixions over and over and over. And so Easter has to be the time we hold on to. we have to say that we will be resurrected into a world where we are safe and free and happy. But I just wanted to address that queer question.
Thank you.
Thank
Good.
you, because I'm sorry I almost cut you off, because that was really, really important. Really important.
Yeah.
Matthew Shepard lays heavy on all our hearts.
And do we expect, Matthew Shepard to jump up and rise out of the ground because God raises the just, the unjustly persecuted up out of the ground? I mean, I think in a sense, yeah, we do, but we know how his life has breathed life into a movement that that is changing lives. I do want to get to these things, and Judy says thanks. I think that's very, very appropriate. Laura asked the question, what are your thoughts on the commercialization of Easter? And then she follows up with, personally, I'm a big fan of chocolate eggs. Any comments?
Yes, I want that one because I too love some aspects of that commercialization, and that's the point. It is tailored to draw us in. I mean, it's about sales, it's about marketing, and they're really good at selling us what we want, like chocolate. And yet, at the very same time, we can love those aspects and just recognize that's also the church's way of ignoring the real call. There's nothing wrong with going, I love this chocolate egg, and I'm going to have some, or whatever it is. But is it shocking that there's a whole majority of people now in the United States that when they associate Easter, they associate it more with chocolate eggs and Easter eggs and bunny rabbits and all that than they do all these deeper issues that we're talking about, which is take up your cross, follow me, love one another the way I've loved you. So I think we as a church, we're going to host an Easter egg gathering on Sunday morning during Sunday school time, 10 o'clock. Bring your kids and grandkids. But we do that in celebration of the resurrection, and we can't let that overshadow the real call, which is we are to live resurrected lives and live like Jesus taught us, because that was what God was saying in the resurrection. Hey, Jesus got it right. The way he was teaching you to live, you ought to be living that. And that's the moment that I think we as a people have forgotten sometimes, is that, if you think about it, Good Friday was the day when all of that was accomplished. The love of God poured out. All these things took place. Jesus lived faithfully in that moment. So it was all accomplished on Friday. So what's Easter morning? Easter is God's way of saying, wake up. He was right. You all should be paying attention to him. Right? That's the celebration. It's the proclamation of the truth that Jenny was talking about. The proclamation that the world is called to be a different place that Seth was talking about. And it's okay to enjoy your chocolate egg as long as you don't let that get in the way of remembering what we are celebrating, and that is a new way of living.
Right. So hopefully it doesn't stop there. That's a great, as you said, way of pulling people in, but then let's keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All I think of is what's the comedian Carlos something or other. Jesus is coming, hide the eggs. You seen that sketch? That's all I think of. He's back, hide the eggs.
Well, on that note, I'll share with you my my dancing Jesus that I have here. He's dancing with Jesus, bobbling figure. Nice. Yeah. So commercialization there.
Well, we didn't have a chance to talk about Easter and all the events of Easter Day and what's your favorite aspect of the Easter morning experience. So really quickly, I know we only have a minute or two left. Let's go around and say, of all those things that happen on Easter, right? All the different stories from the Gospels and appearing to the disciples in the room and doubting Thomas and the walk to Emmaus. What do you think would be another aspect? Real quick, just name the, and we'll end with Steve here. Jenny, you go first. What moment stands out to you on Easter morning?
When Jesus says Mary, and she recognizes him in the saying of her name.
Excellent. Well done. Yeah. I think that's John, right? Seth?
The nap after. No. Those of you who work at a church, you get it, and you can't say you don't.
Oh, amen.
No, but in the
Amen.
moment, not so much that Jesus calls Mary's name, but Mary Magdalene is my homegirl. She's my patron saint. The fact of saying, well, Jesus is dead, and she said, no, he's not. I'm going to go see. I'm going to go make sure. Oh, I love that. So Mary Magdalene's my homegirl.
Excellent. Steve, what would be yours of all the things?
I think it's the walk to Emmaus, and more broadly, it's how people don't seem to, his closest friends and followers don't seem to recognize him when they see him, and they're having to have some revelation, some realization before they understand who they're looking at and talking to.
And that would lead us to an entirely different conversation that we should have sometime about
Somewhere
what
in time?
is. Well, you stole my thunder. I was going to get there. We should come back and have a theological discussion about the resurrection body of Christ and why it was so different and why don't they recognize him. And that would be a conversation I would love to have with the three of you, because this has been really a lot of fun. We will not be meeting next week. We will not be having this gathering of Thursday Live next week, just to give you a heads up. We're going to take a week off. There's some special things happening that both Steve and I will not be available for. What would that be, Steve?
I'm just going to do this and leave it at that. Okay.
That would
Mark,
be,
Jenny, and I all have something on that hand that you don't have. What might that be?
It's vague booking is what we're doing here. Yeah.
That's right.
One of these things is not like the other.
That's right. That's right.
And it's not hair this time.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here, folks.
Well, we didn't want to blindside you with that message next week. So be aware we won't be here next week, but we'll be here 2 weeks after that. Maybe we'll talk about the resurrection body of Jesus. That would be a very appropriate topic for the Easter season.
And on that note, I'm experiencing my own kind of resurrection next week. So I will just go ahead and say it and not out any vague book too much. I'm getting married, and Mark and Annette are performing the service, and many of you have already met Meg. She's been at the church a few times. She actually sang in the choir last time we were here, and I loved seeing that. And I'm a very happy man. Very, very happy man. And my kids are all very, very happy and supportive. And that's what's so cool is they have their own relationships with her independent of me. Especially Elizabeth, who just sits and texts. They're texting each other all the time about stuff. And I don't even know what they're talking about. So anyway.
That's probably for the best. Yeah.
Well, this has been lovely, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll do this again sometime soon. I like the four. I like the four frames.
I do too.
So we'll do it. All right. Until next time. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Blessings.
Hi all. Blessings and happy Easter.
Holy Week.
And be sure to come to the Maundy Thursday service tonight. Be sure to come to the Good Friday service tomorrow. Be sure to come to all of the wonderful services and things on Easter morning, and then take a nice nap.
Yes.
Yep. Take care.
The way God wants it. That's right.